And one of the things I have to thank you for is that the Recovery Act did actually get the formula right, because we have been able to leverage, with the funding that you gave us so far, $7 billion into the hands of small businesses through the Recovery Act funds, and that's going to continue. And 750 banks that had stopped lending, they were frozen, they were not on our books from October to the start of the Recovery Act, are now back lending. So these are very often community banks and other banks, and they are back. Some of them hadn't been in SBA lending since 2007. So we're very glad about that. We are going to be working very hard to leverage those programs into these places where the lending is frozen. In addition, as you know, the President is committed to small businesses, and there are a number of additional programs, many discussions going on about how to address this. It is a critical issue to resolve for the nation's economy.
I'm telling you, in Florida, and I'm sure Nevada and areas that have been really hit hard, because all these banks, even though they're getting capital, they're not lending. I'll be glad to talk to you about this later, but the truth of the matter is they're not lending. So these businesses, a lot of them are going to end up going out of business. I don't understand.
Well, the gentleman yield.
Yeah.
One of the issues that we discussed is not that the banks are not lending because the secondary market is locked. And so it is important that SBA implement the Section 503 and 509 that will help unlock the secondary market so that those banks will have the liquidity to start lending again. And do you have like a timeline of when those programs will be up and running?
Madam Chair, you're entirely correct that if the secondary market is not functioning, then banks don't lend because they have no place to sell their loan and get the liquidity. We have the two programs up there on the timeline. The two ones you mentioned are still in the light green, and that's why the chairwoman is continuing to mention to me. I will say that the secondary market has recovered. It is back to pre-October volumes, and we can give you that data and information. We track it. It's happens on a monthly clearing basis. So we're back at about 340 million. We've been back there, and there's 15 billion of TARP money that stands ready to purchase in the secondary market if that gets stuck again. But we have committed to execute those programs, and we will execute them.
When?
Let me just...
When?
3 weeks? 2 weeks? August?
3 weeks?
Right where they are on that chart.
Let me...
Thank you for yielding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a great point. Let me just say it. My thought is if we can give as a country in this environment 200 billion, whatever the number, plus all these contingencies to AIG, big General Motors, 50 billion, why don't we take 100 billion, take something significant, because that's what it's going to take to help these small businesses. I'm just telling you, and I'd love to have you come down to our area, take you anywhere in Florida. I can tell you a lot of these businesses are rolling out of business, and they've created a lot of the jobs. I mean, most in our area, our one chamber, we had 2,600 businesses. Most of them are 20 and 30 employees or less. A lot of them are folding up. They're getting their lines of credit pulled. They like to work with SBA. Sometimes it takes too long, but we've got to find a way where they empower you, and then maybe it sunsets over time. But we need real money, real results, and right now we've lost 3 million jobs. This isn't one administration or another in my mind. The reality is we've lost 3 million jobs. These are a lot of working families. We've got to get more money out there in good loans that make sense right now, and I'll just close with that.
Time is expired, Mr. Ellsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Secretary Mills. Good to see you again. I'd like to make an observation first, then I'll have a question. First, we talked at the luncheon a few months ago, and one of the things, I've been on this committee 3 years, and I've noticed that every time we'd have a new person come in, we'd ask them these questions, and they'd say, we're looking into that, we're working on that, we're going to do a study on that, and 3, 4, 5 months later we come back, and sometimes there was a new person who said, I just got on the job, and we're looking into that, we're going to study that, I wasn't there then. So I wish you a long tenure, and I also say in 4 and 5 months, I hope you can show us the progress that we've made in there. My question would be, now that you're new at the job, what are a couple things that you walked in the door, you start peeling stuff apart and have really shocked you and said, we've got to do this right away, either in the fraud mitigation, the thing, I think you mentioned that in your testimony, some of the waste and fraud mitigation efforts you've made. And then I'd like to ask Mr. Scheer the same thing when she's done. If you had her job, what would you say, this is something we have to start right now, get done, that you would implement on day one from your observation of being in the agency? So, Ms. Mills, if you'll go first, and then Mr. Scheer.
Absolutely. I'm looking back to just make sure I read the same words to you in my opening statement, because I am on record with the following, which is that many of the problems that have been built up over years, and that they're not going to be solved in a matter of days or weeks, but they will indeed be solved. We have a top management risk-based approach to addressing these issues. They are all on our radar. We track every single GAO report and IG recommendation. We work our way through them. We either agree with them and execute them, or we have further discussion